What's up, guys? Welcome back to Cityscape Brewing. I'm Dennis, and today we're going to be using some fresh hops. For those who don't know, I grew my own hops this last year, and I'm really excited to throw them in my next batch of beer. Specifically, we're going to be brewing up the most iconic fresh hop IPA there is in North America. That's Sierra Nevada's Celebration IPA, which is probably hitting store shelves literally as we speak. So hopefully when this beer gets done, we're going to be having it at the same time as the real Celebration is fresh out on the store shelves. But I'm going to tell you about that entire recipe, talk about those fresh hops and everything that goes along with this recipe. Once you guys hit that like and subscribe button, grab yourself a beer, and we're going to get after it. All right, I know you guys all hit that subscribe button because you're awesome, and you hit that like button because it helps out the channel a lot. But if you really want to be awesome, hit that join button below and become a channel member. Members enjoy awesome perks like some exclusive recipes, my brew day sheets to help you along the way and take some notes, and you get to watch my videos early before anybody else. So hit that join button and become awesome. By the way, this is that lemonade shandy that I just made. That's the Leinenkugel Summer Shandy clone. If it's still warm where you guys are, you should definitely brew this one up. Go check it out. I'll also have a link to it in the video description below. I perfected the Sierra Nevada's Celebration IPA recipe last year, and I absolutely crushed how that thing tasted. But the one thing I was missing was actually putting in those fresh hops. So therefore I had to dry hop some other hops just to get that same or similar aroma that you get in Celebration's IPA. So with this year, I just went ahead and, grew my own Cascade and Centennial hops. So let's talk a little bit about that. Depending on where you live, it can be very easy or very hard to grow your own hops at home. And some versions and some varieties of hops are easier and a little more hardy. Cascade and Centennial tend to be some of those hops that are a little bit more generous, if you will, when it comes to your climate. But I'm going to have a whole video on how to grow hops in the future on my channel, so stay tuned and check that out. And once it is, I'll link that in the video description below. For this video, I really just wanted to talk about the difference between those fresh whole cone hops and, say, pellet hops that you might be used to using from all of your other recipes, right? The main difference is the surface area of the pellet hops. There's actually a lot more surface area when it comes to the pellets, so it helps utilize those oils that are in there. For the hop cones, especially if you grow them yourself, you're not really sure how much of those oils you actually have unless you send them off and get them tested in a lab. So for fresh hops, I would recommend adding them only really at the end of the boil for those flavor and aroma hops rather than for bittering, because we're really not sure how much alpha acids we actually have in my homegrown hops. Even though I can see all the lupulin glands, they turned out fantastic, I'm just really not sure how well they will do, or maybe they'll do too well for bittering. So for the bittering hops that we're adding, and even in the mid-boil hops that we're going to be doing, we're actually going to be using the pellet hops. This will at least make sure that our IBUs and bitterness are in range and what they're supposed to be for this beer. But all of that goodness, all that flavor and aroma, that comes from those fresh hops that we're going to be adding, and we're going to be doing that right at the end of the boil. If you've picked fresh hops before, or you've grabbed a handful of the whole cone hops and smelled them in your hands, you'll know what I'm talking about as far as the difference between the pellet hops and the whole cone hops. And some of that through the drying process, you lose, right? And so the point of using fresh hops is to kind of gain that extra something that you have in fresh whole cone hops. So ideally, you'd want to take those fresh whole cone hops right off of the vines, and you would want to throw them in a beer the same day. I wasn't able to do that. I actually picked these midweek, and I was really worried about leaving them out to even dry out even a little bit before I was able to use them. So to preserve as much of that flavor and aroma as I could and not dry out those hops, I went ahead and I vacuum sealed these bags with about 2.5 ounces each of the Centennial and the Cascade, and then I stuck them in my freezer to help preserve them until we use them, which has only been about 3 days. So these are super fresh, but I didn't want there to be any chance of them drying out whatsoever. All right, today we are using Clawhammer's awesome all-in-one system. It's the 240 volt version. They also make a 120 volt. So let's get this thing started, and then let's talk through the recipe. I've got my grains, they're all milled up. I've got my water additions all inside here. We're gonna go ahead and heat up our water. We're shooting for a mash temperature right between 140 and 150. So let's go ahead and get this thing heated up. So for this 5.5 gallon batch, it's actually super simple. It's mainly all 2-row malt, which is about 95%. There's about 5% or about 1.5 pounds of Crystal 60. That's gonna give it a little of that iconic color. And then there's about 1/2 pound of Carapils. That's gonna help with that head retention. All right, let's talk a little bit about the yeast, which is actually really important for this style of beer. Sierra Nevada's yeast is this citrusy, what they call Chico yeast. And although you can use something that's a clean ale yeast like USO5 or White Labs 001, what I found to be their best yeast, whether you're making their pale ale or whether you're making the celebration ale, is Omega's West Coast Ale 1. That's OYL 004. We're gonna be using the exact same hops that Sierra Nevada uses in this beer. They bitter with Chinook hops at 60 minutes. That's gonna be for 1 ounce for this 5.5 gallon batch. We're gonna add a 30-minute addition of centennial hops. Again, we're gonna be using those pellet hops for those 2 additions. And then we're gonna finish the boil out. We're gonna add some yeast nutrient, and then we're also gonna be whirlpooling with those fresh whole cone hops. And by whirlpooling, I mean we're going to be turning down that temperature to about 170 degrees, and we're gonna let that recirculate with those whole cone hops in there to pull all those flavors and aromas out, and then we're gonna continually cool that down. All right, so this has been about 10 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and I've already shut off the heat, made sure that that is stopped. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this basket up, and then we are going to lift it up just so those hops can drain out. Now I'm gonna use one of these keys that comes with the claw hammer to keep this basket up. So I'm gonna slip that underneath the basket. I'm just gonna set that like this so it can lean, it can drain out all of those fresh hops. We did have a lot of that hop matter from the boil actually kind of attached to this basket, which is totally fine. It's less that's going in our fermenter. So we're just gonna go ahead and let that drain out, and then we'll start cooling this thing down all the way, making sure we get it as close to pitching temperature as we can before getting it in our fermenter, and then chilling it the rest of the way down in our fermentation chamber. All right, guys, we are all ready. We're cooled down. We're in our fermentation chamber, and something crazy kind of happened. So my water hose that I use to cool down with, it's actually on a timer for my hops. And so hence we're talking about fresh hops today. My timer actually went off while I was cooling down and putting it into my fermenter. So the temperature actually is much hotter than I wanted it to be in my fermenter, and I didn't realize the water had already shut off. I did notice that the hose got a little bit warmer as I was putting it into the fermenter, but I was kind of like, I didn't really realize what had happened at the time. And so what happens is my beer is now sitting at like 95 degrees inside of my fermentation chamber. And what I've learned over time is if I have to let that sit for a long time in there, I need to aerate the wort a lot before I pitch my yeast. And so what I need to do in this situation is either pick up the fermenter and shake it super vigorously to get those bubbles in there, to get that oxygen in there, make sure I don't get a stuck fermentation halfway through, or I can use a product like this, which is a degasser you put on the end of a drill. These little things here, they spin really fast, and it creates a whirlpool and introduces oxygen into the wort. So what I'm gonna do is very carefully, without hitting the side, I'm gonna be sticking this thing in with my drill, and I'm gonna be spinning it. Of course, these wings come out, and it really will introduce a lot of oxygen. So you only need to do that for a couple of minutes. Let that really get oxygenated after it cools down to temperature, and then go ahead and pitch the yeast. So this is a good learning example of what to do if you can't cool your wort down and you need to leave it in, say, a fermentation chamber for a really long time. We're gonna be back to taste this thing, and hopefully side by side next to the real Celebration Ale, as we both have hit fresh hop on the shelf and ready to drink. Celebration IPA with fresh hops, straight from my garden to my mouth. Cheers. It doesn't get any better than that. So here we are, guys, the final product, and as expected, it turned out absolutely amazing. We've nailed this recipe several years now, and if you're doing it with pellet hops, you can definitely do it using the same exact steps, and I'll have those listed below. But if you have a chance to get your hands on some fresh hops or even whole cone hops and you want to give this a try, I would definitely recommend it. Part of the video you didn't see was me actually dry hopping an extra 1.5 ounces, an ounce of Centennial, and then a 1/2 ounce of Cascade into the keg. That gave it a little bit more of that aroma that I'm really going for. And I thought I was gonna have Celebration Ale from Sierra Nevada out at the grocery stores, but they're not quite there yet. We're just at the beginning part of October, but I did want to get this video out so you can go and brew with your fresh hops if you've already picked them and you have some stored up and ready to go, or you're just getting them off the vine. No matter where you're at in the country or the world, this is a great one to brew up. I will do a side-by-side comparison of this beer on one of my lives, which I do every other Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time in the United States. If you haven't joined us for a live, go do it, man. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of members there and non-members that are asking questions about brewing. We're sharing beers that everybody's brewing up, and we're just having a good time. So come and join us on Sunday nights. But let's break down this awesome beer, starting with aroma. So just like the iconic Celebration Ale, you get some of those aromatics from the Centennial and the Cascade hops, and you get this difference with this beer than you do with just pellet hops, and that's because of that kind of green ripe hop cone that we're putting in here rather than just dried pellets. And so it is a little bit of a different aroma. I would say that just from memory, because I don't have the side-by-side here, that the real Celebration has a little bit more aromatics, but I can still get the Cascade and the Centennial flavors in there, along with some of that sweet maltiness in the aroma. Color-wise, it is pretty spot on. It is a nice amber golden color. That's what we're really kind of going for with this beer. You get that color from that Crystal 60 and a little bit of Carapils that we have in there, and that really helps also with that head retention, the Carapils, which you get that lacing on the glass, which actually stays pretty well with this beer, especially as it warms up. But how does it taste? Well, you're about to find out. Oh yeah, so this one, again, has a different complex profile because of those fresh hops. You get the Cascade and the Centennial and that bitterness that we used, of course, from the regular pellet hops, since we don't know how many alpha acids are in there. But then you get this kind of almost kind of green citrusy flavors from those fresh hops. It's just different than using pellet hops, and it's hard to explain without trying it yourself. And one thing I'm finding around me, a lot of breweries or local craft brewery places are serving wet hopped beers, both in cans and at their facilities right now, which in past years has been harder to find on the East Coast. I think if you were on the Pacific Northwest where they grow a lot of hops, that's probably very common. However, they're finding new and different ways to get these fresh hops all the way across the United States to the East Coast breweries, and they're taking advantage of it. But again, with this one, you get this really nice, sweet backbone of those malts, but then comes that bitterness kick that you expect from an IPA, followed by all of those hop flavors, citrusy, piney, floral flavors that you get from that Centennial and Cascade combination. A really go-to beer of mine and one of my favorite beers when it comes to the fall months. So if you haven't tried it, go check out Celebration Ale. And then after you do and you fall in love with it like I do, you can go and brew this one yourself. I'll have links also to the original Sierra Nevada using pellet hops video in the video description below. As always, if you have any questions whatsoever, please leave them in the comment section. And make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And if you really want to be awesome, hit that join button, become a member, and be awesome. And join us on our Sunday night lives. It's a lot of fun for everybody. So with that, get out, brew this one yourself. Happy brewing, and cheers. Hey, thanks for watching my video. You're awesome. You want to be even more awesome? Hit that join button and become a member. You'll get exclusive members-only recipes and other perks like brew day sheets, and watch my videos early as they drop before anyone else. So hit that join button below, become a member, and be awesome.